And with that, welcome everyone to Accessible Presentations presented by the Statewide IT Accessibility Initiative of the Department of Disabilities. Usual housekeeping items. We have captioning available today, so if you wish, please enable that from the menu ribbon. The closed captions button should be just to the right side, a little bit before the more button. If it's not there, check the ellipsis button and it should be there. This is being recorded. As is usual, we will post the recording and email the presentation slide deck to you later this week or early next week. If you should have received an email a few hours ago with the slide deck as well. If you did not get it because you registered afterwards or for some reason just it didn't come through, again, it will be sent out along with the recording. If you don't get it then, please contact us and we'll make sure that you get a copy. With that, let's go ahead and get started. So first, what is needed to make a presentation accessible? So we're going to be talking mostly about digital presentations today, such as this one. I will not be really talking about in-person presentations, but a lot of the concepts still apply because ultimately these are the universal things to make something accessible. So I've simplified it to three things. First, accessible materials, making sure that any slide decks, any handouts, anything you're giving out or that people will be taking away is accessible, that they're able to make use of that material, get the information that you want them to get from it in a format that works for them, and in some cases, making sure that they're able to follow along because they can't make use of a screen share that you've provided. Second is the accessible webinar room itself. This can also apply to just any online meeting. Uh, we'll talk a little bit about captioning, about sign language, and then some reminders to the tools you can use inside the platforms themselves. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about language and presentation, how to use narrative description to explain what's happening on the screen and match up to what you're actually saying, without having to go into extra detail to describe every little thing. Pick out what's important. One thing before we get too far, because I just remembered, please save your questions until the end. You can just put them in chat. I'll get to them then, but I'll be running through everything first. Thank you. So, slide decks, how to make them accessible. I'm not going to talk really about any other handouts because most of those will be documents, and we cover that in other webinars we've hosted. You can check our YouTube channel for those. So I'll just really be talking about PowerPoint itself. This is a short 5-point checklist to run through before you send out any of your materials. First off, you want to make sure any images you put in there have alt text or that they are marked as decorative. Second, you want to check the reading order of your slides and also double check the color choices you've made, that they have enough contrast that someone can read the text on screen. Third, be careful with any smart art or similar designers. PowerPoint has a designer tool that's part of the package that helps change the look and add variety to your slide deck. In some cases, though, that can actually interfere because it will move images to a background, or in the case of the smart art, I'll demonstrate shortly how it in itself is treated differently by assistive technology than you might think. Fourth is to make sure to use the accessibility checker. PowerPoint has a built-in accessibility checker. It's a good way to start and making sure that you're handling the basics that we've talked about here. It'll help you check your reading order, remind you to check your alt text. It won't really pick out color well, so that's something you'll probably have to do manually or use another tool. But it will help make sure that your slide deck is readable. And then finally, if you are going to be exporting your slide deck to PDF, some conferences that require that, or other people might want it instead of using PowerPoint because they don't have the program, what have you. You can export to PDF, but you want to make sure that all the work you do is translated to Adobe. In order to do that, when we export it, there's an option we need to check to uh, send over the accessibility tags so that we don't have to redo all our work in Acrobat. So quick demonstration of these. On screen, you should see my PowerPoint. I'm using the desktop app of 365. It should work also in the web browser version, and in mostly in older versions of PowerPoint. I think 2019 still has an accessibility checker. It might look a little bit different, um, but ultimately a lot of these options are the same. So I'm going to first hide my meeting controls so I can get to all of my menu options. And then what we're going to start with is on the Review tab. I can click this, and then I have the Check Accessibility button. And I have three options. First is checking accessibility. This is the checker, so it'll open up a pane on the right side that gives me a breakdown of issues that it's found. I also have the ability to check alt text and the reading order pane. We'll get to these momentarily. If you notice, it adds a new ribbon as well for the accessibility checker that lets you change color to fit or inspect without color, and some other additional options that will help. So in this case, I intentionally left this one blank. Now this is the smart art that I was mentioning earlier. If you use, the insert, or I think draw has this as well. Smart art lets you put text into a fancier way of making it look like a list or some like a flow chart in some cases, that kind of thing. It adds a lot of visual appeal and also helps organize information. Now, the problem with it is assistive technology treats it as an image. So it treats this whole group as a single element. So no matter what text I have in here, it won't get translated to a screen reader, to uh, a magnifying device with read over, um, anything like that. It also can be a bit harder to deal with when you're actually building one of these because some of the other AT, like a voice control, might struggle with, you can write in these text boxes, but they're not really there. So instead, you can write in here, but then you're having to try and match your format, that kind of thing. So it adds a significant challenge. Now, also, if you notice, because of the way smart art works is it this is the default size it assigned to this text in here. Is this accessible in these three hexagons, kind of forming a line between the three rows? Now that's really small. I'm having trouble reading it on my own screen. I imagine most of you are having trouble with it as well. I can change it, but slide art, or smart art, sorry, I don't know why I call it slide art. Smart art tries to uh, make it fit to that specific area. So because it's adjusting it, it can make it a bit more challenging to work with. I'm not saying you can't use smart art, but if you want to make it fully accessible, you only have a few options. One is because it's treated as an image, I can add alt text to it. So I can say, is this accessible in a series of hexagons? Or what I can do is empty the text out of it, mark this as decorative, so I still have the look I want, but then use regular text boxes to form the words in a readable format that will work for everyone. A bit more involved, but it does offer an option here. So those are your two ways you can handle smart art and make sure that it's still accessible depending on what you're doing with it. If you only have a little bit of text, I recommend adding the alt text. If it's like something like a flow chart that's much more involved, what you'll probably want to do then is add alt text saying flow chart follow the steps, and then making sure in your text boxes, when you put them on, make sure that they're in the correct reading order. We'll get to that momentarily. But if you look at this other image, which I need to bring up the alt text menu, you can see I've written in alt text here, Microsoft Accessibility Checker showing 2 errors and 1 warning. I can also mark this as decorative. What that means is that it makes that image skipped by assistive technology, so that if this is just there to kind of fill in space or add visual appeal, I can remove it from reading order so someone who isn't going to benefit from it, or it's not adding any additional context, or it's repeating content, they can just skip it and not have to worry about it. So these are your 2 options for alt text. Now, if I go back to the assistant, it tells me I need to check my reading order. So what this is telling me is I'm not following the traditional uh, default layout for this slide. I added new content, or I changed the look, or what have you. I need to check my reading order. So I can either use verify reading order from that tool, or from the accessibility menu, I can use the reading order pane. It gives me this list, and each of these is the elements here. So there's my first title, there is my image, there's my checklist, and then here's my smart art. So this is a little bit out of order. I would really want someone to read the checklist before they looked at the images. So what I have to do is select this one in the list and then press up. So I need to make sure that these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 match the order I want someone to go through this. So title, checklist, accessibility checker image, smart art. If you are using an older version of PowerPoint, you'll be using a different one called the selection pane, and it's going to go the opposite direction. It's a little unintuitive because it's working off of the visual presentation. So just keep that in mind. If you're not using 365, you're going to have to go from the bottom of the list up, and as the order someone would move through. But once I've set that, then I'm good. So that's the usefulness of the accessibility checker, the assistant. Um, it is always running, so I can just click this at any time as I'm building my presentation, and it'll tell me any issues. I do recommend that you kind of check in on it after you've completed some slides, or you've kind of finalized a section of your presentation, so you can go back and make sure that you're double checking things like alt text or your reading order. It will warn you things of like table issues. It can detect some color contrast. So in this case, it can do something with like text boxes and such, but things like smart art, it isn't actually able to tell, because as things start overlapping, it can't grasp that difference between multiple levels. So just keep that in mind, is that it's a good place to start, but use another tool as well. So once you've done that and you've made your slide deck accessible, you want to share it. I want to make sure everyone gets this good information. So some recommendations for sharing your material. First off, provide your material ahead of time if possible, usually about 1 to 3 hours. I know there's sometimes some concerns about doing so, because then people don't show up to your presentation because they're like, oh, I got what I needed. But it does allow people with disabilities, either those using assisted technologies like screen readers who can't interact with or read the screen you're sharing, or it helps those with cognitive disabilities like ADHD or something follow along, or change the content to fit what they need. So if someone is colorblind and needs to change the colors for themselves, or someone wants to use magnification, or they just want to simplify it and get rid of the images so they just have the text, they can do so. Give them the ability to make it work for them. And that's the benefit of sharing this. Now, there are a couple tools for sharing material during the meeting in an accessible manner. We'll talk about one of them later that our partners at the National Federation of the Blind use. But all of those are a service cost. So that's why I want to make sure to tell you guys the very basic is to just share the material you have ahead of time, just a little bit, just so that they have enough time to get it ready and set up for themselves so they can follow along and put it into a format that works for them. Obviously, reshare the material after the presentation along with the recording. That's kind of just general etiquette of these things nowadays. It's not necessarily an accessibility thing, but it is still very helpful. And then third thing is also make sure that attendees can contact you if any issues arise with the materials. Now, actual webinars are online presentations themselves. Ooh, I just realized I went all dark. Sorry, I'm looking. I saw my camera feed. I just saw the light disappear. Um, anyway, distraction. Uh, all these things, I'm talking about in terms of a webinar, but really all of this applies to any online meeting. Um, what you want to provide in most cases. Uh, we'll talk about closed captioning, both manual and automated, the benefits of each. We will talk a little bit about AI, but it kind of still falls in the same context of those two. We'll talk about use of sign language and things to remember when you're including it. Go into the narrative description, then make sure that we remind our users of the options available to them. Make sure that any links you share or chats or questions that come up in chat or Q&A, you provide those through a second channel as well. And then finally, a couple additional tools for presenting that might help. So closed captioning, the very first thing most people think of when this kind of thing comes up. You have two options. One is automated captioning. So the tool that's usually built into the platform that you're on. Used to have to specify which ones have it. They pretty much all do now. I actually don't know of a meeting tool that doesn't have some form of basic subtitling available. So the nice thing is that there is no cost to that typically. You're already paying for it by having the platform itself. I still estimate automated captioning at about 80% accuracy. Some have been improving as uh, systems are incorporating machine learning or AI to improve them, as uh, audio quality and network quality have been improving, and it's easier to pick it up and analyze it. All of that has been improving, but still, it often struggles with things like names or acronyms, or if there's a network issue, or for whatever reason, audio cuts out slightly, or in some cases, if someone's talking quickly or has an accent, there's a number of situations where it can kind of struggle. So it's never going to be 100%. I do recommend, though, for most of your standard meetings or your working groups, just use automated captioning unless someone requests captioning. In those cases, find out what they want and need because you need to fulfill their request. That's the the caveat with all of this. Under ADA, if someone makes a direct request, you need to fulfill it. Now, manual captioning cost is dependent on the vendor you choose. Pretty much all of them will charge on like an hourly basis, and you'll book an appointment like we do for our captioner today. I sent in a request to the company we use, and then they'll find the captioner and set it up, and then invoice us. So costs can vary. They are generally more accurate and are able to provide additional details. Now, automated captioning, some cases like Zoom now and Microsoft Teams, I think Google Meet also to some degree, are able to associate the subtitles with the person speaking because they will use the audio input. Now, that's limited to specifically if one person is using that one audio If you're using, let's say, like a boardroom or something for your presentation, other people are speaking in the boardroom, it's going to label it as you. Whereas a manual captioner is able to pick out who is speaking and add that themselves. They also can add proper grammar and other details. Uh, One example here was when I started, right before the recording, I was humming a little bit and Captioner put in sings. You can add those kind of details. The automated captions won't do that. Now, AI captioning is kind of falls in between the two, in my opinion. I didn't put it on here because it's still something that's changing. It's still automated captioning, it's still built into a lot of platforms, but services are starting to offer essentially enhanced captioning through AI. So you would hook up a plugin or another service to your Zoom room, and that would be your captioner. The same way you would set up a manual captioner, except now it's an AI. Some of them are, boasting 95% accuracy. I've been looking into it, and they do seem to be reasonably more accurate than the base level ones, like the one built into Zoom, because they're putting a lot of effort into refining it. But you're still kind of running into the same problems you're running into with any automated system still. So it is an option. I would just, I'm still more trusting of an actual manual captioner than I am of AI at the moment. I'm sure in another year it will be improved even further. And at that point, it really comes down to what service you're using and what they offer. Ultimately, for any wide scale public presentation, or if you're doing a large scale, like annual meeting or something for your department or your company, it's best to procure a service because that's going to be better and more accurate than the automated systems built into the platform. The final point is don't do this yourself. It's hard. Um, Most captioning is done with a special keyboard and special software that allows for shorthand, and most captioners are able to type well over 200 words per minute. Unless you're able to do that, you're going to struggle. It's just not worth the effort. In most cases, if you can't get a manual captioner set up, still put up the automated captioning because that's still something, and it's better than just leaving it blank. I put that warning in because one of the first times I did a presentation on this kind of topic uh, years ago was talking about it, and I put up like they're typing 120 words per minute, and the captioner that time was like, no, we're typing like 240. So I was like, all right, we're making sure we specify that for people from now on. Now, sign language interpretation. It's always good to have. If you can have it for your presentations, get it. Um, at the very least, make sure that people know that they can request it. That's our standard policy. You do need to give some time for that because it does take some time to get an interpreter. So if you put in the request the day before the presentation, they're unlikely to find someone unless they already have someone in-house. Um, if you do get a interpreter, make sure to still have captioning available. In most cases, from my coworkers who are deaf, having both options together is the best solution. Um, some people have different preferences. Some people might not know sign language, or in some cases, just having both sources of information allows for full comprehension. And in the case that there's either a network issue or something else happens, or it just in some cases following both gives them a clear picture. It's a personal preference. So make sure that they have the tools that they want. Again, this is best for public presentations, for speeches, public announcements, anything like that. In the case of like an internal meeting, you only need it if someone in your coworker or in your cohort needs it, or your office, or what have you, and they should let you know. If they don't, then that's a problem. But that would be the work with your ADA coordinator or equivalent to see if that's actually needed. Um, I do want to mention longer sessions will require multiple interpreters. And generally, anything over an hour, they're going to assign two or more interpreters so that they can switch out. If you do get sign language interpretation, please keep in mind the following is you do require good spacing or the user ability to focus video feeds. In most cases in online presentations, that's either called spotlighting or pinning. Uh, Spotlighting will force that view for everyone in the room. Zoom does that. Um, and the nice thing about it is that's a little bit different in that pinning uh, is on just the user end, or you can pin for everyone, but spotlighting kind of forces it. So it's a good way to enable that. However, in most cases, the important thing is that the interpreter's feed is pinned so that it is always there and that their video feed is the same size as the presenters, or it's there instead so that the users are able to actually get the interpretation. If for whatever reason they're in the same video feed, if they're in the same room, you need to put the camera focus between both the speaker and the interpreter so that A, both are in frame, but then B, that the interpreter's space is significant enough that all of the sign language can come through. Generally, when you set these things up, most of the interpreters will uh, contact you and let you know what they need. Um, they'll also tell you if they're having issues or when they sign on, what have you. In both regards, I should mention finally that when you're setting up your presentation, open it up 5-10 minutes ahead of time, usually 10, so that you're able to set these things up and iron out any technical issues that happen before your presentation itself. So now, descriptive narration. The important thing with this is being picky about how you're talking, making sure that you're describing the important things describing the important things on your slide deck, but not going into incredible detail that's going to bog down the presentation. So making sure that you explain your visuals, your pictures, your charts very clearly. If you remember earlier on, I was describing exactly how the smart art looked, that it was, a series of hexagons with text split across them, and that I was mentioning how things were ordered left to right, that kind of thing. That's what I'm talking about. Being very specific about what is on screen, but what's important about it. I don't need to go into the detail of the picture on screen of a woman putting out this flow chart of, I believe it's I want to say French, but it might not be. In either event, it's a language course, and they're pointing out the third box on the second row, and that's under the umbrella of Miss parents. I hope no one on here actually knows this language is going to be like, what is wrong with this person? But that was a lot of extra detail that's not helpful. Now, in this case, this image here is really just to kind of add enforcement to the concept. So I really shouldn't go over the image at all. And that's where you need to draw that line of what's needed in order to get information across and what is maybe just a filler in order to make the slide more appealing or to kind of add emphasis or what have you. So in this case, I could have just said, make sure to, as you're presenting, gesture to the element on screen that you're talking about, such as the lady in this picture is doing. That would be a better way to approach this. If you have anything complex on your slide deck, like a table or a chart, make sure to provide those handouts, especially ahead of time. Those kinds of information, you're really the only way to make them fully accessible is to give users the access to them directly. When you're presenting them, again, you don't want to bog down your presentation, so only point out the very important data points, but don't just say, look here at this point. Actually state what is the data there. Is this column A is 30% higher than column B? Making sure to state that so that users understand that. And then if they want the additional information, they're able to look at the chart themselves and look at maybe the greater context or other data point comparisons that you didn't really need the time or have the time to present directly. If it's like a really complex infographic or a flowchart or something, you might want to use comments or even a second slide just to add extra description. What you can do in PowerPoint, you can create a second slide that maybe summarizes the information in text. And then in the list on the left of the slides, you can right click the description one and say hide slide. And what that'll do, it'll still be there in the program, but it won't, when you're presenting, it won't show up in that list. So it's a good way to make sure you have that description available so that in the case of the infographic or the flow chart, if they can't get to the parts of it and read individual parts, they can get a summary in text that works for them. I know some cases people say you can also use the notes section for that. That's a possibility, but I've known other people to say don't. So generally my advice is use comments or use an additional slide to add description. Don't use the speaker notes. Another reason for that is so you don't mess up any notes for yourself. One example that I also like to point out was an investment course I had taken, just a short little demonstration of a tool, and it was showing a graph on screen detailing how uh, person A started investing at age 20 at $5 a week, and person B started at age 30 investing $25 a week. And it then, went on to say, here's what they would expect to see at retirement age. The voiceover didn't read the chart. It just said, see the difference? Person A earned this much more, or earned more. That's all it said. It didn't tell me in audio how much that was. Was it 10% more? What was the final total? Because I might hear person A earned more than person B, but it doesn't give me the context or emphasis of was it, did they save $100,000 more? Did they only get $10,000 more? How important is this to me? So that's why going into that description during your narration is really important, but you want to make it part of your overall speech to make sure that A, you're reinforcing your point that you're demonstrating both through visual and audio. And then second, so that user who can't get one or the other is still able to get all the information and the emphasis and context you're adding to it. It also means you don't have to go back and add additional description or bog down your presentation going into too many details and build in that time. It just comes together seamlessly, and that's why we like to talk about this. Now, some general reminders is one, we want to make sure that we tell our users what options are available. So like I first started, the usual housekeeping items. Again, this has become kind of just general etiquette, but it's still good to have this checklist to run through, making sure people know there is captioning available and how to activate it. If there's sign language available, how to pin or spotlight that if you haven't done so for them, depending on the platform you're using. In some cases, like Zoom, you can multi-pin, so making sure to do that. And then where to get the materials that you've shared and the recording once it's done. And then second, remind your users where the menu options are available in the chosen platform. In some cases, if you are in a meeting with a new employee or something, you want to make sure that they know the platform and what capabilities it has, especially if they're going to be doing presentations using that platform. You might want to also inform people that Zoom and such has additional options on the user end for things like screen reader compatibility. Sorry, give me a second. Excuse me. Uh, and it also has ability to adjust the font size and color of captioning. Teams has some ability to do that too with the screen reader compatibility. WebEx needs a plugin, the assistant that's in the platform. So you need to go into your account in WebEx and enable that. Once you've done so, that offers a lot of additional tools, that kind of thing. And then finally, again, explain where to get handouts, recordings, or during or after the meeting. So any presentation you're doing should follow all of these. If you're doing internal meetings, like a quick meeting or something, that generally is going to be more reliant on who's showing up to the meeting, what they need, and if any of them have specific requests. Now, a couple additional things, or here is the tool that I mentioned earlier that the National Federation of the Blind uses. It's called Scribe for Meetings. Um, it's available from that website, scribeformeetings.com. And it is a paid service, but what it does is translates a screen presentation to an accessible format, usually HTML. So the way they use it for their presentations, their boutiques, is they will upload the slide deck after they create it to the Scribe for Meetings platform that they're on. And then during the presentation, there'll be a bot that is participating in the meeting that will essentially watch the screen. And as you're sharing your screen, will follow along and present the correct part of the slide deck on the web browser. It is available in multiple formats, so they can follow along in HTML, or they can download it as a Word doc, as text only, as a PDF, or as a PowerPoint, that kind of thing. So it's also another way to share your materials ahead of time so that users can just grab it and run along and follow along. We don't use it because of the state requirements, and then also because it is a paid service and we currently aren't uh, able to pay for it. But it is a possibility you might want to look into for at least the larger scale presentations if you're doing a lot of them. From my understanding, it's only available for Zoom and Microsoft Teams at this time. However, I'm sure that they're working on further compatibility. This information might be a little bit out of date, as I last checked it a few months ago, but you never know. All right, some additional resources. I do have on the slide deck lists of the help centers for Google Meets, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom. So you can use any of those help centers, those articles. They'll help you find the particular tools for those platforms. I didn't really want to go into that today because it is a lot of extra detail that ultimately is kind of the same point. I don't really think you all wanted me to try and describe every single keyboard shortcut across all of them. I have links to our webinar series There we have additional information on making your documents accessible and other topics. Uh, I have a link to the NFB's boutique series, and they've started posting them on their YouTube channel. So if you've missed any of those, you can check that out. I also link to Adobe PDF and Microsoft Office accessibility tools for you. If you want more information about this or any other topic, you can contact us at mdod.nva@maryland.gov. That goes to both myself and our other team member, Dan. Um, and we will get back in touch with you and make sure that you get the information you want. Went a little bit fast. All right, so let me jump into the questions here. I want to make sure I give plenty of time. I see someone saying, okay, can we share the slide deck? You should have received, if you meant this slide deck, you should have received it a couple hours ago. If you didn't, it will be sent out with the recording either by the end of the week or early next week, Monday at the latest. Um, if you mean just sharing in general, yes. I mean, honestly, sharing the slide deck is your best bet. It's kind of become etiquette for most presentations. You know, a lot of the webinars you might be going to, I've probably sent you an email afterwards and such. Um, I know some people don't like to share it ahead of time because they worry that people will not attend then, but it is a lot easier for those with cognitive disabilities or assistive technology to follow along if they have a copy of their own. Okay. Additionally, aren't there security concerns for AI captioning? Um, there have been, depending on what you're using. If you're just using direct captioning, like in the case of, the a plugin for Zoom or something, I don't think so. But if you're using something like a note taker or one of those AI tools in order to summarize the meeting and uh, provide that kind of write up, then there are security concerns with that. Um, for those of you working in the state, it is something that we're still trying to get information on. Um, I've been talking with the Do It AI office in order to kind of establish what our recommended guidance is, but you should look to them for that. For those of you outside the state, look to your IT office, or if you're on your own, do your research to find out the security concerns. I mean, Google has stated, and I think OpenAI has stated they don't record the information gathered from the note taking, but you know, all of this is still kind of a black box. So exercise your best judgment. Is there anything anyone wants me to go over? I built in a lot of extra time because I thought there might be a lot of questions because there was last time, but we got we got through a little fast, and then I wanted to make sure that we covered everything. So if there's something people want extra detail, please let us know. Otherwise, that's it. Thank you, everyone. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'm just going to go ahead and stop the recording.